Marjolein Benschop, and I'm very excited to be speaking at the Polyglot Conference 2020. I'm also very excited to be talking about this topic in particular. It's about how we can use language coaching techniques into the language learning process, and especially with language classes. So in case you are taking language classes, or in case you're a teacher, then this talk is definitely for you. And it's all about how we can therefore boost student satisfaction and teacher satisfaction. My name is Marjolein. As I said, I'm a Dutch polyglot living in Peru, and I'm also a language coach. I've been teaching English, Dutch, and Spanish for the past 5 years in multiple countries, such as the Netherlands, Spain, England, and Peru, where I'm living now. So I would like to start off this talk with an example. Just imagine you want to learn a completely new skill. And in your case, you want to become a competitive swimmer. Now, if you are already a competitive swimmer, then just imagine you want to learn how to be the best athlete or something, okay? And there's obviously many ways in which you can become a competitive swimmer. Maybe you receive help from friends who are also swimmers, or maybe you watch a lot of YouTube videos, or you learn from a book. But in your case, you decide to go for a coach. Okay, so you have an option between, you have actually, there's several options. Okay, let's imagine there's 3 coaches and you can choose one. And you have a trial lesson with each one, so you get an idea. With the first coach, who is a coach for swimming, you're a little bit surprised because instead of teaching you how to do competitive swimming, he teaches you how to do synchronized swimming. And there's a lot of exercises to become better at synchronized swimming. Okay, that's the first coach. Then the second coach is a coach that gives you amazing tips. So you're very excited. He gives you all these tips to be a great competitive swimmer. But when you want to go in the water, he's like, no, not yet. Okay, and clearly he's not open to a lot of suggestions. Then there's the third coach who really understands your dream to become a competitive swimmer, who also gives you a lot of guidance and tips along the way on how to learn and how to stay motivated. He's also really open for suggestions. Now, I wonder what coach you want to go for. If I were you, I would go for the last one, and I bet that's the one you've chosen. Now, my examples were a little bit extreme, but that is the aim of my talk, how we can be the coach, if you're a teacher, how we can be the coach that really finds ways to boost the learner's progress. And if you're a learner, how we can actually be a proactive learner. Because in all of these examples, the learner could have done something to get a better outcome. Okay, so in this talk, you can notice I'm really excited. We're going to talk about what we can do to have a more focused and motivating teacher as well as a proactive student. Now, what is a coach? You might have noticed that there's coaches everywhere, actually. I mean, there's life coaches, there's business coaches, fitness coaches. There's all sorts of coaches in the world. Probably you can Google any words you have in mind and you just add coach and there will be one. Okay, so what does a coach do? In my definition, a coach helps his or her coachees get from one point to another. There's goals and they help them get to that goal. Okay, and why is this important to language learning again? Well, in the language learning field, we don't tend to call them coaches, we tend to call them teachers. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Obviously, teachers teach. But there's certain things we can do in order to be a little bit more like the third coach we've seen in the example before. Yeah. And that's what this talk will be about. And what I would like to highlight is that in the language learning field, there's been slight change. So before you would go to a language class with maybe 10 other students, and now you can get a one-on-one class with a tutor online on several teaching platforms. And this is a great opportunity for both the teacher as well as the student to really boost the language learning process and therefore get more progress. Okay, so I really think that it's a great opportunity that a lot of learners and teachers aren't taking advantage of yet. And so I'd like to contribute to changing that. And I also think it's important because I sometimes hear students say that they don't notice enough progress and they get demotivated and maybe even blame the teacher. And I also hear teachers that say that their students aren't progressing enough because they're not proactive enough. And I want to just throw those negative thoughts out of the window and find ways in which we can make the student more proactive and the teacher more like a coach that guides them to stay motivated and on top of their goals. Okay. So here you see the definition of a coach, and I've already given you a sneak peek of how we can apply it to language learning, and I'll be sharing my framework with you. So as I said, I've taught for the past 5 years in different countries, and in those years I've developed my own approach to language teaching and coaching, and that's what I incorporated in a framework. Then I'd like to get into more detail by also talking about how we can apply this in the classroom and how we can apply it outside the classroom. Now, more on this soon. Let's start with the first point. How can we apply these coaching techniques, kind of like the third coach did, into language learning? And what is the role of the student? Now, what I would like to highlight is, again, there's two people responsible. When you think about those coaching positions, like a fitness coach and a business coach, life coach, those are all processes in which two people are responsible. There's no coachee that can blame the coach for not progressing enough if they're not proactive. Okay, and so the same should happen in the language learning field. No student should blame the teacher if they're not proactive. And what can we do in order to make the language learning journey more effective? Well, as you saw from my definition, going from one point A to another point B, we need to have clear, like, where's A, where's B, what are our goals actually? So this is point number one in the language learning process, okay? You need to know what direction you're going. Otherwise, what's going to happen is you're going to be like coach number one in the swimming example, who who teaches synchronized swimming instead of competitive swimming. And they're both swimming, but it's not what the person wanted, right? So this is why goals are so important. And I still see a lot of learners that don't define their goals. Again, it's not the responsibility only of the learner. The learner can be guided by the teacher to set their goals. Okay, so what I do when someone comes in my class and they say, hey, I want to learn Spanish, then I'm like, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean to learn Spanish? Does it mean that you want to communicate with your parents-in-law? Does it mean that you want to use it at work? What does it look like? Okay. And since that goal is often so vague, we set smaller goals that leads towards that, okay? So things that are easier to obtain. So as I said, it's the learner's responsibility to define their goals, and it's the coach responsibility to help them with their goals. Why is this so important? Because as I said, if the goals are not clear, we might be teaching the wrong kind of thing to them because it might not help them in real life. Yeah, so it's really important to know what the student wants to focus on, whether it's speaking, listening, or a certain context or a certain topic. Really have those goals clear and just ask your students, hey, what is it you want? You take note of that and you base your lessons on that goal, or the small goals as well. Then it's very important to have an environment in which you can both address motivational and progress issues. Okay, so what you can do is ask your student, if you're a teacher, you can ask, how are you doing? And the answer can just be like, I'm a little bit demotivated. Or maybe they're like, oh, I'm great. I noticed so much progress because I went to a birthday and I started speaking my target language. So I've had this with my coaches, and it's really, really nice to hear that progress. But it's also good to have those moments to celebrate the progress and also to kind of analyze why someone might be demotivated. And this is really important because if not, a student might just give up and not come back. And yeah, so so a student can it's also a student's responsibility to just mention, hey, this week I've been a little bit demotivated. Do you have any tips? So I do have students who, without me asking, just tell me like, yeah, like it's been going well or it hasn't been going well. Then also keeping in mind that it's the learner's journey, and the coach is just there to help, to cheer, and to give them all the tips and information they need. But it's a learner's journey. So we need to keep that in mind, that a learner can give and a teacher can receive suggestions. Okay, as a teacher, this can be a little bit difficult because we might have our ego, we might have developed our own teaching style, and then someone comes and says, nah, I like it a different way. Yeah, that is sometimes a little bit difficult, but keeping in mind that it's the student's journey and you're helping them, just that then you realize that it's okay. Another thing is that the learner should speak up, should be honest, and should say it when they're not happy with the lessons. So in the first example with the swimming coaches, then in the second example where there were great tips, but the student couldn't practice, you should have said so. You should have said, I think you're awesome, but can I also practice? Yes, so this is really important in order to reach the end goal. And this end goal kind of becomes a shared goal between the coach, who would love the coachee to reach that goal, and the student. Another thing that can happen along the way is the student asking for the way and the coach showing the way. And the way that we show the way is through language specific tips, yeah, certain tenses or rules or pronunciation, as well as language learning tips. And this is really where the coaching element comes in, okay? Because a lot of teachers, I mean, we're paid to give language specific tips, aren't we? But the language learning is something that really adds value to the classes. That's where you set yourself apart more as a language coach and only someone that teaches a language. Actually, you're doing more. You're helping them build good learning, language learning habits. Okay, so I know there are many polyglots here in this community. And so if you're a polyglot teacher, then this is definitely something you can take some time for in a lesson, maybe 5 minutes, and you suggest a new language learning resource or tool. Yes, so that's really useful. Now, how can we apply this in the classroom? And the goal of using coaching techniques in the classroom is actually really to make the student more proactive, to make the student, as I said, the opposite of proactive is passive. We don't want the students to become passive. Yeah, so it's really the student needs to feel in control so that the lessons are as effective as possible. Let's start with the teacher's side, okay? In order for us to have a proactive student, we need to be flexible as teachers. And so As I mentioned before, you can make nice lesson plans based on the goals of the students. You can choose your topics and the grammar points, whatever, based on the goals that they've mentioned. However, if there are certain linguistic or emotional needs along the way, then those are more important in your lesson plan. What I mean is that if someone needs help with a certain verb or a certain pronunciation pattern, then that is more important than what you had planned in the moment, because the student is so eager to find out more about that. Another thing is the emotional needs. As I said, the motivation it's so important. So sometimes we just take 5 to 15 minutes to talk about what they can do to get back on track. And again, that's more important than what you have planned out, because it's their journey. Also, what works great as a teacher to tell them, hey, I have my lessons, but if there are certain topics and grammar points that you would like to be added, then tell me so we can incorporate that. Yeah. So I have certain students that told me, hey, I'm very interested in this and this, can we add that as well? And so I was like, sure, yeah, why not? That's what they're motivated about. And us asking for that would be a good strategy. Another thing that is very useful is sharing an online document. With that, I mean is maybe sharing a document so you kind of have like a shared whiteboard. Okay, this is why I love teaching online, is that since it's online, you can work on the document at the same time. And during the lesson, you can write some notes and then they can do some exercises. Doesn't really matter, but you're in the same document, and that makes the student more active and in control of what's happening. So a document in which they can write as well. So they're not passively watching, they can contribute to the lesson. They're part of the lesson, they're part of the whiteboard, okay? Another thing for the teacher is asking a lot of questions so that there's a lot of student time and there's a lot of practice. As we've seen with the swimmer coaches, the second example, the student wasn't really supposed to go in the water. And so the same with teaching the students, if the student's aim is to talk, then ask a lot of questions so that they really, really practice. The proactive student, if you are a student and you're curious what you can do to get more out of your language classes, then this is something you can do. As I said, you can ask a lot of questions that you might have collected during the week. Okay, so you can tell your teacher, hey, I have several questions. Is it okay if we cover those? And you know, why not? That is exactly what you needed. Another thing is to express what you'd like to focus on. So if you're really into Star Wars and you always talk about Star Wars and you would like to talk about that in your in a foreign language, then tell your teacher that. They can't read your mind, okay? So just tell them. We're making the student more proactive and therefore the lessons more effective. Another thing that is very important for a student to do is to analyze how they like to learn. Me, myself, I love learning with videos and subtitles and songs, and so it's pretty audio visual, right? So any teacher that could help me to learn that way, that provides a lot of resources and teaches the class in such a way, would be the most effective for me. So not only knowing that, but also expressing that to the teacher, telling them, hey, I prefer learning more with videos instead of with the book, then they'll probably agree. Yeah. Now, how can we apply this outside of the classroom? Now, I want to clarify really quickly that I don't expect you, as if you're a teacher, to be available 24/7. You also need a break. Of course, students can text you, whatever communication method you use, but it doesn't mean you have to reply at any moment. What I do want to highlight is that there's certain things you can do at the end of the lesson to make the students more motivated when they don't have classes, in between classes. So what can a teacher do? This is related to an anecdote. When I was at high school, I only had like 6 classes in Spanish because it was a separate course. And in those 6 classes, every single class, the teacher would recommend certain resources that were available online just for free. And so every time after class, I would use those resources, and I would be even more interested in the next class. And at the same time, I had French and German. I had those for like 5 to 6 years, but I was more proactive and progressed a lot in Spanish for just those 6 classes. So this is really what I'd like to show to you as well. If you want to be that kind of like the coach, then really provide extra resources. And I've seen some students, some teachers tell me that they're afraid that their students are going to go away, that they take those resources and then never come back. In my experience, that hasn't happened. They actually see you as the expert, and they're very happy that you know those resources and that you can recommend them more, and that they see progress when they learn with you. So like that Spanish teacher, my Spanish is already fluent, but I wish I still had her in my life because that was amazing in high school. Another thing is accountability. We often give students homework, but it's more important for them to commit to themselves than for them to commit to you. And so what works better, in my point of view and from my experience, is to ask them, hey, what are you going to do in the meantime? You have, you have 1 week between our classes. What are you going to do to learn this language, to get closer to your goals? And some might say, yeah, I'm going to learn the most important words, or I'm going to try and speak Dutch with my dentist, or whatever it is. And then the next week I ask them, how did it go? And then the students really get happy about that. So we celebrate the small successes. When it went well, we're like, yes, great. And so they get really excited about doing things outside of the classroom and then celebrate it in the classroom. The next point, which is share success stories, is related to your students. You have some students that don't progress as fast, and some that progress really fast. I bet there's many reasons why some progress faster than others. But in language learning, sometimes it's really just the strategies. So you can tell the students that don't do so well what the others do, and that can motivate them. So maybe the others make flashcards after the lessons, or they practice, they record themselves. I don't know what they do, but share it with your other students so they are aware of the possibilities. Sometimes students aren't aware of all the things they can do to progress. As I mentioned, the online document I share with them is some students write novels in them, others write sentences about cookies. I don't know. Every student has their own thing they like doing in a document, and then in class we correct it. But knowing for them that it's their document is something very useful, and it makes them more active instead of passive. Finally, I'd like to highlight that as a teacher, you can be very clear and honest. You can say, look, I can help you and I will help you, but there's one thing I can't do, and that is learn for you. And they know that, So like, it's not harsh, it's just the truth, and any adult would understand that. It's their responsibility. It's really a nice feeling as a teacher to put the responsibility also with the student. Yeah, it's not only your responsibility if you're a teacher, and if you're a student, it's not only the teacher's responsibility, it's your responsibility too. So what can a student do outside of the classroom? Well, luckily I'm at the Polyglot Conference, and there's many of you out here that know what you can do outside of the classroom. But for those that don't, or if you're wondering how you can motivate your students, tell them to look and ask for resources. What I mean is that they can look on their own in the free time, whatever is out there on the internet, or they can ask you. Okay, but the next step is actually experimenting with those resources, because how often do you give resources and they don't do anything with it? So again, put the responsibility with them to say, okay, go ahead and experiment this week with those resources and see which ones you like. Okay, so that's important if you're a student. It's also important as a student to build habits, whether that's listening to a podcast when you're doing the dishes, or whether it's studying 20 minutes before you go to sleep. But building those habits and committing to those habits is something that's the student's responsibility. The teacher can tell them that that exists, but that's that. Finally, like decorating their room, being aware of that they are really learning that language. So for example, if you're learning Chinese, Mandarin, then you can put the Chinese flag, and you can put a message on your whiteboard saying, yes, a step closer to speaking Chinese, whatever, but remind yourself of that goal. Oof, we're at the end of this talk, more or less. And what now? Well, I want to remind you of one thing, which is that no one is perfect, okay? So if you felt along the way, oh, maybe I'm not good enough as a teacher, or maybe I'm not really a good student, no problem. No one is perfect, okay? However, what we can do is try out, as I said, like experimenting with the resources, in this case, experiment with some of the methods you've heard today, experiment with some of the techniques, and see what works. See what works for you and what works for either your teacher or your coach. It's nice to know that whether you're the teacher or the coach, you have control over what's happening, and you can always give suggestions. As a teacher, you can give suggestions, and as a student, you can. And that's what really coaching is about, sharing the journey. What I'd like to say is that if you're interested in having a summary of the tips, then you can download the framework on polyglotinsights.com/coaching techniques. I'd love to share it with you, and I'm very happy if you're interested in reading it again. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank you all for listening to this talk all the way to the end. I'd love to answer any questions you might have on my email, polyglotinsights@gmail.com, or I'm also on Instagram, which is also Polyglot Insights. Okay, thank you so much for your time.